Mount Madonna is integrating the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and these goals are designed to build a global partnership and coalition aimed at addressing a variety of pressing global challenges. And we are integrating these SDGs into our preschool to our 12th grade academic program. Many of our alumni have gone on to become leaders, and their work is having profound impacts on the world. And we are featuring our alumni and our friends who are working day and night to safeguard our environment and to work toward to continue building a just and equitable future. Tonight, Tobias Aguirre, who is a 1994 MMS graduate, he also holds degrees from Stanford University and the School of Global Policy and Strategy at the University of California, San Diego. There, he specialized in nonprofit management and business strategy. Tobias also serves as the CEO of FishWise, which is a Santa Cruz-based nonprofit organization. FishWise provides a holistic approach to sustainability, and the organization aims to transform how the global seafood industry does business in order to protect ocean health and workers' rights. So tonight, Tobias will discuss how the oceans serve as the foundation for all life on the planet. He shares that oceans provide the air we breathe, the food many of us eat, and livelihoods and enjoyment for millions of people. Illegal fishing, forced labor, and even modern slavery are problems on our oceans. So seafood, which is the world's most traded commodity, is both the problem and the solution. In this seminar, we will explore the roots of these challenges, innovative partnerships and solutions that hold great promise, and ways in which the achievement of SDG 14, which is life underwater, might hold the key to progress on all of the SDGs. And so if tonight inspires you, we do encourage you to attend our next SDG, which will be by Usha Kilpatrick on May 6th. And that one, we're going to learn about the Aloha Plus Challenge, which is Hawaii's bold sail plan for leading the way towards meeting the UN sustainability goals. And so as we stated earlier in our introduction, this evening is going to be organized into 3 parts. The seminar by Tobias Aguirre, followed by the value style facilitated conversation led by Shannon Kelly and the 12th grade students. And the last part is going to be questions and answers from our audience. And so tonight we thank Monterey Bay Mortgage for sponsoring this event. Without further ado, I am very honored to introduce you to Tobias, who also happens to be the proud parent of Finney and Arias, who I think are present for this evening, as well as his wife, Jessica. So Tobias, welcome.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Anne. It's a real pleasure and honor to be with you and the senior class at Mount Madonna and the broader Mount Madonna school community. So I want to lead off with a quick question. I'm curious who is in the room with us tonight. If you're a student, alum, faculty, parent, friend, supporter, just pop it into the chat. I'm just curious who we have with us tonight. And while you're doing that, I do want to give a shout out to Arias and Finney, the young little hawklets that they are, 2nd grade and kindergarten. Awesome. So looks like we have a lot of parents, administrators. Great. Keep them coming. So I want to start out with an appreciation for the importance of this incredible planet that we live on. The oceans sustain all life on our planet. And as Anne said in the introduction, they provide food for us. They provide air for us. They regulate our climate, such an important ecosystem service that they provide. And they seem almost inexhaustible. I mean, you look at this curve of our planet in space and you just think that it must go on forever. And they do in a sense, but at the same time, they're not inexhaustible. And their sheer vastness creates the opportunity for nefarious characters to hide illegal practices. And so we're going to dive into that tonight. This is my hero. Her name is Patima. She's a woman from Thailand. And a long time ago, she decided that she was going to dedicate her life to supporting and rescuing those that are most vulnerable among us. What she does is she leads rescue missions to far-flung islands to find fishermen that had been trafficked or enslaved onto fishing boats, and then perhaps they had escaped or they were abandoned at sea. And so this is Patima's story. It's about a 2-minute video.
เราถูกบังคับให้ทำงานเกือบแทบจะไม่ได้เห็นแผ่นดินเลยถูกตีหางกระเบนตีถูกบริษัทตามล่าทั้งวันทั้งคืนวันนั้นมีผู้หญิงมาแกก็ถามผมอีกว่าแล้วอยากกลับบ้านไหมကျွန်တော်ပတိမာဘလူးမြင်နေဆိုရင်တော့လူတွေသက်သာရှိပါတော့ก็คือฉันจะอยู่คือมันเรื่องมันเกิด30-40 ปีแล้วเนาะคนตายเยอะ5 ปีได้น้ำเชียงจ้ะ12 ปีเลยครับแล้วปุ้ยไม่รู้ไหมว่ามาไปอินโดทำอะไรช่วยคนโอเคแล้วเดี๋ยวกลับมา How many hours to Gaiman? This really depends on the wind and current. ลูกเรือคนแรกเนี่ยเขาก็จะบอกว่าเพื่อนเขาอยู่ไหนได้ใช่มันเหรอใครบ้างไอโฟนตัวผู้ใหญ่ลิงที่เบซิน่าเนี่ยเขาไม่ชอบเราอยู่แล้วล่ะเพราะว่าเราไปรู้มาပွေးသားရဲ့လန်တီရဲ့အလေးရဲ့တူๆလို့ส่งคนมาด่าตะคอก
Many of people has been killed because of this issue.
เฮ้ยนั่นอีกคนนั่นไงมูตะไปอีกคนนึงอยู่ตรงนั้นทำอะไรกัน
kau tahu semua
So that is just the trailer, but every time I watch it, it gives me the goosebumps. There's a full feature film behind that. And as Patima says here, I can't save everyone. The fishing industry is going to need to step up. So while she can go out to these far-flung islands and confront these criminal syndicates that are trafficking fishermen onto boats, that's one part of the solution, but the industry itself has to step up, and that's where FishWise comes into the picture. I've been really honored over the last couple of years to take this film and these stories directly to the seafood industry. So here, Patima and I and the monk, Por Prasert, are on a stage in Thailand, and he's sharing his story of abuse at the hands of his boat captain, the boat that he labored on for many years, and he even lost an eye. And so he's seeking legal reparations. And again, here, Patima and I are on a stage in Tokyo at the Tokyo Sustainable Seafood Symposium. And sharing this work, bringing the importance of these issues to more than 500 people in the Japanese audience that involves some of the largest seafood companies in the world, governments, nonprofit organizations. And as is befitting of Japanese culture, the method there is to bring all of these stakeholders together, to learn together and then act together. And there's really incredible progress that's happening there to start to fight illegal fishing and understand these issues around forced labor and human rights at sea. And through all these efforts, Fatima herself and a network of volunteers and her staff have helped find life, given a second life to more than 5,000 fishermen. So I hope you can see through this story, you know, the incredible acts of courage that Fatima shows in the face of so many challenges. And I believe it was in 2017, she was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. So today we're here to talk about SDG 14, Life Under Sea. And it reads as conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. And take a look at this incredible picture. It's one of the best that I've seen that captures life under the sea and how it inherently and intrinsically is connected to life above water. And we see this bay, it looks like, just teeming with life, and a fisherman on top, toiling, earning a livelihood, and providing a vital source of protein. Here in California, we don't often appreciate the fact that around the world, more than 1 billion people count on fish as their primary source of protein each day. And so at FishWise, we want to support scenes like this. We want to help sustain oceans and good and decent work at sea. So this is what we do at FishWise. Our mission is to sustain ocean ecosystems and the people who depend on them by transforming global seafood supply chains. And so it's a very specific approach, engaging directly with the seafood industry. And we have a vision for holistic sustainability that's very much in line with UN SDGs. We envision a future in which the seafood industry, in collaboration with governments and civil society, so that's nonprofit organizations, take full accountability for the ocean resources and the people who depend on them, so that oceans are restored to be more productive and biodiverse, while providing that critical source of healthy protein to meet the needs of a growing global population. That's the environmental component. And then people benefit and thrive in an inclusive and equitable industry with decent working conditions for all. And then finally, that the seafood businesses themselves remain financially viable for generations to come. You know, we do want a healthy, thriving industry because it provides literally millions of jobs around the world, as long as it's done sustainably and responsibly. So this is how we do it. We accelerate sustainable seafood solutions through leadership, partnership, and collaboration. And ultimately, we're working towards greater transparency and responsibility so that those fishermen that you saw in Fatima's story, they can't be hidden in the high seas far from the eyes of law enforcement or civil society or others. And we have kind of a humble beginning. We started in Santa Cruz. We were founded by 2 UCSC graduate students, and they were confronting kind of a basic challenge. They would go to a local grocery store like New Leaf Community Markets here, and they wanted to buy seafood because it was a healthy option, but didn't have enough information to know what was sustainable and what wasn't. And the grocery stores themselves didn't have any of that information. It was pretty complicated. And especially back then, all along the West Coast, many of our fisheries were greatly depleted and in a pretty unhealthy state. So they came up with a great idea. Let's partner with New Leaf, and in collaboration with the Monterey Bay Aquarium, who is generating science-based recommendations for seafood, the now familiar red, yellow, green stoplight system, FishWise was born. And so we put those labels in a seafood case and saw and asked, you know, what would a consumer do? And overwhelmingly, they started to choose the more sustainable options. And so we knew that we were onto something. And that was the very beginning. And I also just want to give a quick shout out to the Mari Bay Aquarium. They've been closed for a full year. And on May 15th, they're opening their doors again. So we'll get to see all the incredible sea life on display there. So go visit them. So what started out just with New Leaf has grown incredibly. We're now assessing more than 150 million pounds of seafood annually. It's hard to even imagine like how much that is, and I don't think I can quite visualize it, but it's a lot. Starting out with that first fishmonger, so that's the person behind the fish case. We've now trained more than 5,000 at 4,000 stores across the country. And those stores utilize a network of more than 460 suppliers from all around the world, and they import seafood from more than 50 countries. So a little tiny idea has really blown up into something pretty big. Here's some of our past and current business partners. And they really should be saluted for being leaders, for stepping up to this great challenge, for taking responsibility for the products that they buy and sell. And you can see that, you know, these are some of the largest in the world with Target and Albertsons, for example. So this is our approach. What I've just described is what we call direct supply chain engagement. So that's working with grocery retailers and the companies that transport and deliver them seafood. We also expand our impact by a collective engagement strategy. So what that means is there's some challenges like this lack of transparency that are bigger than any one seafood company can solve themselves. They need to join together. They need good information and support and guidance. And so that's what FishWise offers. And the private sector, which is the companies themselves, they can do their role, but government has to play their role. And that's through strong regulation and policy. And so we help inform that policy. And through that, these three different strategies, we're starting to see some real impact. So here's the challenge that we're facing. So one, there's an ever increasing demand for cheap food and for cheap seafood. Through that, our oceans have become overfished. About 90% of our global fisheries are at or above capacity. That means they can't produce anymore. And aquaculture, which is the other side of this equation, we won't talk about it a whole lot tonight, but that's farm seafood, is often powered by illegal labor practices itself. And so these fish farmers and fishermen, they often don't have any real incentives to change because they're not necessarily getting more money for a more responsible method. And there's a lack of clear and aligned guidance throughout the supply chain. And government, which I just described, international regulation has really fallen short. Some of these fisheries, they're managed by 20, 30 different countries, and their processes rely on consensus, which we know is not always easy to reach. And this is all exacerbated by poverty and discrimination, and that can lead to slavery and human trafficking. So throughout all of this, there's a lack of data and there's a lack of transparency. And that's, you know, one of the key areas that FishWise has really zeroed in on. So here's a picture of actually a pretty well-functioning process or story of bait to plate, like we like to call it. So up at number one, this is where a fish is caught. In an ideal world, that information, how it was caught, what the species was, that's all written down or entered electronically, preferably. That boat then goes into port, number 2, and they offload and they exchange that information and they start creating electronic record. Most fish is then processed and prepared to be shipped. If there's any transformation of the product, then that information should be caught as well. And then because seafood is the world's most traded commodity globally, it's shipped all around the world. Ideally, those shipments are inspected and that documentation is checked. And then it goes into wholesale markets and grocery stores and restaurants. And all that whole story follows along with the fish. And so when we're at a restaurant or at a grocery store, we know that it was caught legally and sustainably. This is how it should work. This is how we want it to work, but it's not always the case, unfortunately. And the reason, is illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing. So the illegal part is fish can be caught in regions or say a marine protected area where no fishing is allowed. They could be using fishing methods that are indiscriminate, catching a lot of other sea life that's the non-target species. Unregulated means the fishing might occur in the high seas, far from any kind of regulation or oversight, where really it's the Wild West out there. And then unreported means that catch, it's not counted, it's not documented, and that fish can essentially be laundered into the black market where that information doesn't follow along with the fish. And that's often done by international crime syndicates that sometimes traffic in people, drugs, weapons, and all kinds of dirty things. So those practices, they have all these kinds of impacts. They harm fish stocks, they compromise good fishing management efforts. Those that are trying to be responsible and do a good job get undermined. We all lose our trust in these sources. We don't know if it's safe to eat, and ultimately increases the risk of food security. So the big question is, why take action on holistic sustainability? Why is this so important? Again, the oceans sustain all life on our planet. And I would argue that there's nothing more important to do, I'd say in conjunction with climate change. So we're talking about the SDGs tonight. This is a complicated graphic, but the Friends of Ocean Action have done a really cool job of mapping all of the different ways that SDG 14, Life Below Water, supports and empowers all of the different SDGs. And there's way too much information to go over through tonight, so we'll just focus on a couple of them. 5. Actually looks like 6. So we'll start at the first. Life below water, and 1, no poverty. So a healthy ocean is able to lift and keep people out of poverty. For number 2, 0 hunger, blue food. So that's food from the sea, and it doesn't necessarily have to be fish. It can also be seaweed, which is one of the most abundantly grown sea products in the world. It has the potential to create far more protein than the 2050 population requires. That's if we use these resources responsibly. And importantly, on the human side, increasing gender equality in the ocean economy allows tens of millions of women to flourish. For decent work and economic growth, a healthy ocean economy can be more than twice the size of the current ocean economy. So because we're doing a fairly poor job in managing our ocean resources, and we're scooping up all kinds of fish and only using a small percentage, we're being really inefficient in how we engage with the ocean. If that's done more responsibly, fish stocks will actually come back and it will grow the ocean economy. And ending illegal fishing and all associated criminal activities, those that I just described a few minutes ago, that would ensure long-term prosperity of marginalized groups. And then lastly, and this is where we come in, our responsible consumption will lead to real improvements in food from the sea. In a few minutes, we'll hear a little bit more from our colleagues at the Monterey Bay Aquarium, who have really been leading the consumer education around this issue. So again, why take action? At FishWise, our philosophy is a rising tide lifts all boats. And while we applaud and support and empower in any way that we can, all of those on the ground efforts, which are critical, FishWise's approach is to improve the entire seafood industry. So we like this, this phrase, I believe is from John F. Kennedy, a rising tide lifts all boats. So one way we do that, we've created a roadmap for improving seafood ethics. And it's a framework to help seafood company address these issues. And just a couple of quick examples, more than 40 million people are currently engaged in forced labor globally. And just in Thailand, which is a real hotspot, 70% of fishermen are showing indicators of forced labor. And so that's things like abusive conditions or deception in how they are brought into the work, or their passport and other papers are taken by their employers. So this is a kind of a picture of the 8 steps that we lay out for the seafood companies to work through, where they can take responsibility for their own practices. And it often starts first at those fundamental labor rights. And over time, as they improve, it builds towards more decent work for all seafood workers. And it's grounded in these 3 foundations. So 1, responsible recruitment. That means that a worker doesn't have to pay for their job. They know what kind of job that they're getting into, and they understand the terms of that agreement. There's a contract. Worker engagement means that the workers themselves can help set the terms of the work. They have agency. They're able to voice their own needs. And then finally, decent work at sea means that there's safe conditions and the protections that, say, a farm worker has on land. Of course, that industry isn't perfect itself, are extended to those at sea, especially since they're often, hundreds of miles away and outside of any kind of contact. So this is another international project that we've started. It's called the Seafood Alliance for Legality and Traceability. And it's founded on this same principle around collaboration. If we bring companies, governments, and nonprofits together in honest conversation and candidly learn from each other, we can define and explore new ways to trace seafood. And through that tracing comes transparency and ultimately greater responsibility. So these are some of the goals that we have built in that project. So what does this all mean in terms of the actual health of the oceans? I've given you a couple of donuts. So this is the data section for the data nerds. I know you're out there. On the left is fisheries today. And there's just that little tiny wedge of light blue and green. Those are fishery populations that are considered sustainable. Then that yellow and red, those need improvement. And, on a positive note, that 7% of purple, those are in active designed improvement projects. And so they're actively improving. But the big mystery, and where we have so much work to do, is in that other 75% of global fisheries that are not yet certified. And honestly, there's not a whole lot known about them. So we have a long way to go. But the good news is there are many, many organizations, individuals, companies themselves that are coming together around this ambitious goal that by 2030, 75% of global fisheries will be sustainable. And that's very much in line with the UN SDGs themselves. So again, how this all relates is that the ocean are the very basis of health on our planet. As the oceans go, so do we go, and so does all other life. There's such a precious and resource for all of us. So this is where we all come in.
We've really been focusing on the environmental impact of fisheries and aquaculture. And what we need to do now is really look at sustainability holistically. Fisheries and aquaculture have to be socially responsible, and we have to eradicate any egregious human rights abuses in our supply chain to really realize true sustainability.
These issues could no longer be denied. We had to step into it. But a part of that is building transparency. The first step is to help them get a sense of their supply chain, start to engage their seafood suppliers to ask questions.
Those persistent questions from the consumers do impact the businesses, because when we work with the business partners, they still identify customer demand as one of the top motivators that they are signing on to these commitments and partnerships with NGOs to begin with. Social media is also a tremendous resource for the consumer who maybe doesn't want to say something at the point of sale, but you sure can follow up via social media. There really is a lot you can do with vocalizing your market expectations at the point of sale and or using social media to really help amplify the issue as well.
I'm going to invite you to join with us in this work. Join with FishWise. Our website is www.fishwise.org. If you're inspired by Fatima and her story, her website is saveoursons.org. And for the seniors out there, I hope that maybe you can see yourself in this kind of work, because we can certainly see you in this kind of work. FishWise and our 30 or so staff, we were in your shoes one time too, where we're kind of anxiously and excitedly thinking about graduation and how we could make a dent in the world, what place we might find in the world. And with this foundation that you've been given and that you've created for yourself at Mount Madonna School, you're so well situated to pursue your passions. And as Paul Hawken has said, you are brilliant and the earth is hiring. So join in the fight and look forward to the discussion with everyone.
Hello, my name is Sarah Vince, and on behalf of the senior class of Mount Madonna School, we would like to thank you for taking the time to speak with us tonight. And as a part of our Values and World Thought class, we have prepared some questions for you. Thank you again for speaking with us about your work with Seaspiracy and sustainable fishing, and we are honored to have this opportunity. That being said, I'll go into the first question for this evening. I've read that COVID-19 and the pandemic have had both positive and negative effects on our oceans. Are there any lessons we can take away from the pandemic in terms of protecting our oceans?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think starting on the human side, especially as the shutdown started and we started asking, well, where are we going to get our food? We can't just like drop into a restaurant now. We were going to grocery stores, and I think I definitely got a deeper appreciation for the essential workers that were farming our food, catching our food, transporting it, and then providing it to us. And so I hope that mentally we can extend that appreciation around the world to people that are doing that hard work still today, And we can ask some of these questions, you know, under what conditions are they working? Are they being treated well? Do they have the opportunity to their needs be represented? On the environmental side, it did cause a pause, you know, where people couldn't go out to fish. And that has really impacted a lot of fishers and a lot of companies. And a lot of these fisheries, including, you know, ones off our coast, they're used to selling into restaurants, and all of those outlets instantly closed. So they had to pivot. They had to create some direct to consumer markets and avenues. But, you know, it certainly has been a difficult road, and we're happy to see some of these responsible actors kind of getting back on track.
Thank you.
All right, so I think I have the next question. Have the changes we've already seen in the ocean due to climate change affected the people you work with and encourage them to adopt more sustainable practices?
Yeah, it's really interesting. You know, I think some of the greatest impacts are yet to come. I've been really encouraged by President Biden really stepping up to this moment in a way that no president, US president, has ever done. But how these impacts are seen in the ocean are many. For example, fish are moving. They're going to find, you know, the cooler waters. And so, say in the Western Central Pacific, all these tropical islands, where they go to find those fish, they're not there anymore. They're in someone else's water. And so that's actually going to increase the opportunity for conflict. It's going to require greater international cooperation as these natural systems are adapting, you know, to human caused climate change.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Savannah. I understand that hydroelectric energy is a source of power for many people. I'm also aware that these dams are harming the salmon population, so they can't get to their spawning grounds or to the ocean after hatching. How can the need for power and the need to protect salmon exist together?
Yeah, great question. There's some really exciting developments up in Washington in the Olympic National Park, the Olympic Peninsula, where I went camping with my beautiful family. I see you. The Elwha River that had been dammed for something like 100 years, that dam was taken down. And so those salmon were able to return to their traditional breeding grounds for the first time. And there's more and more stories like that, especially these derelict dams that aren't even producing electricity anymore. There's no reason for them to be there. And so it takes citizen action to engage with local government, state government, to encourage the removal of those dams. And of course, energy generation has evolved through renewable resources, solar, wind, geothermal, and others. And again, at the federal government level, we're going to start to see a huge push to support renewable energy sources. And so those old systems, it's time for them to go so that the fish can come back.
Hi, so I recently watched Seaspiracy, and it appears to imply that there is no such thing as sustainable fishing, and concludes that the only solution is to stop eating fish entirely. Is this a sustainable solution? And do you think this is the answer? And if it is it possible to implement it when fishing has such a big impact on economies all over the world?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a timely one for those that haven't seen it. I don't know that I can wholeheartedly recommend it, but the film Seaspiracy on Netflix, it's gotten a lot of attention. In my mind, it's a real missed opportunity to have a platform like that to tell a story as important as the health of our oceans. Unfortunately, it uses outdated science in some places, including the prediction that the oceans will essentially be empty of fish by 2048. That scientific paper was retracted and amended like a decade ago. And it has this framing around conspiracy that's a little strained. And unfortunately, it comes from a very Western centric perspective. It says fishing can't be done sustainably, so stop fishing. What they fail to recognize is, as I said earlier, more than 1 billion people around the world, especially in the global South, rely on that protein. Without it, they do not have another source. They can't go and eat the lab-created, vegetarian, cell-based, fancy seafood options that they featured in the film. And so we have to think about seeing these issues through more than just our own kind of Western eyes. For a different view, I'd encourage people to see Ghost Fleet because it's a really just a no holds barred but incredibly inspiring story, and it's kind of a nice balance to Seaspiracy.
Hi, I think I have the next question. Aquaculture seems to be a very controversial topic, but it has the possibility to be one of the most sustainable ways to get seafood. Can you share with us your thoughts on the issue?
Yeah, aquaculture, as with most things seafood, is a bit complex, and the answers around it often depend. But one quick resource, if you want to learn more and you want to understand the sustainability of different seafood options, is to go to Seafood Watch through the Monterey Bay Aquarium. Aquaculture is now more than half of the seafood that's produced globally. And it can be done incredibly responsibly, especially fish lower or seafood lower on what's called the trophic level, or the kind of the nature's pyramid. And so that's things like shellfish, oysters, mussels, clams. Those are some of the most sustainable options out there. There's other things like trout that can be really sustainable options. The big difference there, or one important kind of scientific principle and production practice to look at, is, are they being raised out in the natural environment where extra feed and feces and antibiotics can flow out into the environment? Or are they being done in contained systems like tanks on land and raceways, where all those outputs can be captured and recycled? So it's a really interesting topic. Aquaculture is going to continue to grow. It just needs to be guided in ways that have less environmental impacts.
Thank you.
Danny, I saw your question in the chat about Ghost Fleet. It's definitely, I think it's maybe on Apple Plus, but if you just look up Ghost Fleet, you should be able to find where it's streaming these days. Into the Line is a great film. It's a little bit dated now. I think it's about 10 or 15 years old, but that's another great documentary on this topic.
Hi, I'm Octavio. My question is, in an article written in 2015 about the US grocery chains like Whole Foods, Market, and Trader Joe's are gradually phasing out Chilean salmon, Routers quoted you saying, "This is the beginning of change in seafood." Since 2015, what progress has been made?
So farm salmon has been one of the most controversial topics. Salmon is one of the top 3 consumed seafood in the US, along with tuna and shrimp. And salmon is often farmed in net pens out in the ocean. And so that fits that example of feed and feces and escapes of salmon out into the natural environment. That said, they have made solid, consistent strides to reduce their impacts. Some would say not nearly fast enough, and others would say they're making good progress. That's what makes it such a controversial topic. In Chile, because of some unique environmental conditions down there, they use an extraordinary amount of antibiotics to raise salmon, including ones that are important for human health. And many doctors have warned that if the overuse of antibiotics in animal husbandry will then make them a lot less effective for humans when we are confronting health challenges. And so overall, we certainly want to reduce the use of antibiotics in aquaculture. And that's one of the big topics around Chilean salmon.
All right, I'm the last senior question. So at Mount Madonna, we do beach cleanups, and my 5th grade environmental project was about sea turtles. And overall, just like the focus on sustainability and the environment has really impacted the way that I think, not just about the ocean, but about the earth. I'm wondering how Mount Madonna has affected the direction of your career, or if you ever expected to end up in kind of the area that you are today.
Yeah, thanks for the question. It instantly flashed me to, I think, maybe sophomore year, where I volunteered for an organization called EarthSave. As a Mount Madonna student, every Friday, we would go and volunteer at various organizations around the county. And EarthSave was started by the author John Robbins. He wrote A Diet for a New America, and is a revolutionary book in the early 90s that revealed for the first time the impacts of a meat diet and factory farming and all of the water and feed and things that go into food production. And it really set off a whole new wave of vegetarianism and veganism, which do have much lower impacts on the environment because of the resources that they require. So I'd say that's one little snippet, going back to Seaspiracy, that is a good thing. Like those diets, from a planetary perspective, are a great option. We have the luxury to be able to choose that and have our supplementary vitamins and minerals and make it all work. Of course, other people in other parts of the world don't have that option. But it was those early experiences at EarthSave kind of opened my eye to the role that food plays in the health of our planet. And I definitely had no idea that I would be doing this work. After I went to Stanford, I worked for a tofu delivery company for 3 years. And I like to joke that I was the only Stanford educated tofu delivery guy. So we don't necessarily have all the answers. We don't necessarily know where our life is going to take us. But I decided to go back to graduate school. And when I was there, I found a great program at UC San Diego. And I started to get interested into international relations and issues like this. And so I was very fortunate to find an issue that I was passionate about and just really commit to it. And surprisingly, I'm still with the organization 16 years later. So we'll see. I'm curious to see how this story ends whenever it does.
Thank you so much. We're going to open the floor to questions, but before we do that, I have a question. It's a very practical question. So today is Earth Day, and I wonder, from your years of experience, what is the number one thing that you think that any of us could do to help create a more sustainable ecosystem for our oceans and make better choices and practices in our daily lives?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's, yeah, what are we going to do each day? There's so many different ways that we can act. Some of the counties in California were just declared a water shortage, drought scenario. So of course we need to have that on our mind around water conservation. Fortunately, growing up at Mount Madonna with these little low flow shower heads, we got 3 minutes. So that was ingrained as a kid. But certainly water conservation, as our climate shifts in California, I'm sure Noah Diffenbaugh talked about that quite a bit. Transforming our energy use over to renewable sources. So that's get that e-bike. Our local congressman, Jimmy Panetta, has introduced a bill that would offer a 30% rebate on electric bicycles. So let's support him in Congress to pass that bill, because I'd like to see a whole lot more electric bicycles zooming around town than being stuck on Highway 1 trying to get home from work. And we've talked a lot about our food choices. But one thing that I've learned is that companies, especially those that interface with the public, they actually do have their ear to what their customers want. And if that is communicated clearly, they will respond. And so we have to make our voices heard. We need to vote with our dollars, things like that. But those are some good places to get started.
Wonderful suggestions. So if anybody has questions, you can raise your hands. You can put questions in the chat.
Oh, yeah, it looks like Dion has his hand up.
Hey, Mohan, thank you so much. Hey, I want to hear your comments on the trash in the ocean. And I came really late in life to realize that pretty much everything that's dropped on the ground goes into the ocean. What's happening? What could be done? How does it affect your work? Thanks so much.
Yeah, it is mind-blowing how much plastic is in the oceans. If you look up the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, the last time I checked, it was as big as Texas. I think it's probably like 3 times the size of Texas now. So all of that super convenient, easy plastic that we're buying all day long, it does find its way either to a landfill or it can easily find its way into the ocean. So we absolutely have to reduce, not just reduce, I'd say eliminate single-use plastics. In terms of our work, one of the larger sources of plastic debris in the ocean is derelict fishing gear. It's also called ghost gear. And so that's nets that have been lost during a storm, or an illegal fishing operation. Once the Coast Guard comes by or law enforcement comes by, they'll actually cut their net and just leave it behind. One of the groups that was featured in Seaspiracy, Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, actually does some pretty amazing kind of direct action work to hold those sorts of folks accountable. And they'll collect fishing gear and they haul it in laboriously. But there are a lot of organizations working on it. There's so much more that needs to be done. And really, we need to realize that I don't think recycling is a real thing. It's starting to become known that when we thought that we put it in the bin, that it's magically converted into some other new product. In many cases, that's not happening. And I believe that China no longer takes our plastic. So I think we have to completely shift our minds and not buy it in the first place. And again, demand companies use alternative materials, because there's a lot of other options these days.
In the chat, it says, wow, so much information about our oceans and their importance in our lives. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and inspiring us to do more. And I'm actually going to put a plug for our 5th grade class. Right now they have I'm going to read it on Facebook so that I don't make a mistake. It's the 5th grade cleanup challenge. The rules are simple. Go outside and pick up trash. Use our tally form to track the types of trash collected. And you can upload a selfie with the trash you've collected and send it to us. Let's make the oceans a bit safer for the 100,000 marine animals that die each year from plastic.
Yes. And locally, we're really fortunate to have an organization, Save Our Shores. I think they're one of the oldest marine conservation groups in our area, certainly, if not California. But they do beach cleanups consistently. And so that's a great place to volunteer also.
So Sarah Vince has her hand up, and then Bob Kaplan afterwards.
You mentioned earlier about demanding companies using different reusable resources. What reusable resources would you say would be the best? Because like we see a lot of like bamboo utensils, or there's metal, there's glass. Which of these would you advocate?
Yeah, there's a lot of options out there. I'm not certainly an expert, but I try to have my metal water bottle. When I remember, you got the nice little bamboo cutlery set, slips right into your backpack. When I go and get a bow tie at Dharma's, they have these amazing to-go containers, no plastic involved. I think they're made out of things, bamboo and corn and other biodegradable, compostable products. So especially for food, Santa Cruz has done pretty well. We're pretty progressive. A lot of that, again, is through Save Our Shores and groups like that. We don't want to just catch it on the beach before it gets to the ocean. We want to catch it and transform it where it's actually being produced and offered. So that's an important strategy too.
Thank you. Bob?
Yes, Tobias, thank you so much. I'm educated more tonight than I have been when I came in. And I have a question about the work that you've done with purveyors, large grocery purveyors, and the strategies. What strategies have been successful to help people at that level change practices?
So there's a method called a fishery improvement project. And that's one of the kind of the leading approaches. And so you could have, let me think of a good one. A fishery, say in the Gulf of Mexico. And the method is to get all of those fishermen organized. You get that fishery assessed according to an internationally recognized, credible assessment methodology. And that helps identify what are the impacts, what are the areas for improvement. And then you build a work plan around that, a budget, and you systematically improve that fishery. One of the big approaches out there is to use the biggest buyers of seafood to both support those kind of improvements, but also to encourage and incentivize and require them. And so you have a Walmart who's actually really progressive on all of these issues. They'll convene their suppliers and say, you need to organize fishery improvement projects. And they need to meet a certain bar in order to continue to sell into our company. And that's a really powerful leverage and mechanism for improvement. So that's where we've seen a lot of progress. And in addition to having really strong management, or improving management at least, from the government itself, there's been some a lot of shining lights around that kind of work.
In the chat, Nicole asks, what do you feel is your biggest success or the biggest impact of the work of FishWise?
So one of our more notable ones, in the early 2010s, we partnered with Target, and with them, they set the commitment that all of their fresh and frozen seafood would be responsibly sourced by 2015. They hit that target. So if you go to the Target over in Green Valley or wherever is closest to you, all of their seafood is responsibly sourced according to their policy. And that information is on their website as to what that means and what that bar is set. You know, and they're a national retailer. For me personally, we started out focused on the environment. And we did a good 12 years of work purely focused on the oceans. And then, like I said in that last little clip, these stories of human trafficking and human rights abuses, they became so loud and so important that we couldn't deny them, that we couldn't consider a piece of fish sustainable if it was produced by workers that had been tricked and trafficked and working in these kinds of conditions. And so we have fully embraced that side of the work as well. And that's why I talk about holistic sustainability. And so we're kind of a bridge organization between marine conservation groups and human and labor rights groups. And we really take a lot of pride in creating those bridges, mutual understanding, and be able to learn from each other's work. Because the issues that we're working on, they're inherently connected. If there's a criminal enterprise fishing on the oceans, they're not going to follow the rules in anything that they do. And so a lot of the methods for shining light on them are shared both on the environmental and the human side.
Wow, that's fascinating. I really want to thank you tonight, and thank you for inspiring us to make better choices. And I think everyone here has learned a lot about our oceans and how our choices are really impacting the sustainability, and we each can contribute to improving the sustainability and the protection of our oceans. So thank you so much. And I also want to thank Shannon, Kelly, and all of our seniors. And again, thank you to all. And please do join us at our next one. Our next one is going to be May 6th. It's going to be Usha Kilpatrick. And it's going to be the Aloha Plus Challenge, Hawaii's Bold Sail Plan for leading the way toward the UN Sustainability Development Goals. So please do join us, and thank you, Tobias. And if anybody has additional questions, please, you can hang on. So thank you so much. And do help our 5th graders on their project and go out this weekend and pick up some plastic.
Tobias, I actually do have one more question, because as I stated to you earlier in a breakout room, I'm going to be going to college in Ohio, and I'm going to be in a really liberal college and setting. We'll be close to Columbus, and they've already made a lot of advancements environmentally. I just kind of want to bring this Mount Madonna level of consciousness there. And I just want to the best way to bring as much information and to establish that kind of environment there. What do you think would be the best way or resource to do that?
I would say bring yourself. That's who you are. And you're going to attract that naturally wherever you go. The first year of college, you're kind of thrown into the mix. And it's really natural that you make friends with kind of whoever is around you in your first year. And that's fine. That becomes your support network, your social network. But what I found over time in college, I started to find those who I really resonated with. So I'd say the sooner you start on that journey, the better, by looking out, for clubs, or create your own club around an issue that you care about. And you'll start to attract, like-minded people. But the key is to be yourself and believe in yourself.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And I will continue to read everything that's in the chat. So great, Tobias. Thanks. What great work, Dad.
Yeah. Thanks, Dad.
Excellent information. I really appreciate your insight. Thank you. What a wonderful presentation. Really informative. Thank you so much. And so I see lots of gratitude. So thank you. And I wish everybody a wonderful evening. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Anne. Have a great night, everyone.